The princess faced Duke Hugo, her posture composed despite the tension between them. "So, I may include my own terms in this marriage?" she asked calmly, trying to understand her place in this arrangement. "Of course," Hugo replied, his tone clipped and cool. "But if we don't sign the contract today, the arrangement is off." Lucia frowned slightly. "Why?" Hugo's gaze didn't shift. "The future is unpredictable. The longer we delay, the more uncertain it becomes." His explanation sounded like a calculated warning, not a concern. Lucia didn't respond right away. She was trying to understand him, not just his words, but the reason behind them. After a moment, she spoke again. "May I ask you something personal?" He nodded once. "Why do you hate a woman's love?" The question lingered between them, heavier than the silence that followed. Lucia immediately second-guessed herself. She hadn't meant to be intrusive. Hugo remained still, clearly taken aback, not by the question itself, but by the tone in which she asked it. Lucia cleared her throat. "Was that a question you cannot answer?" "No," he said at last, voice low. "No one's ever asked me that. You just caught me off guard." She waited. He continued, his tone flat but honest. "It's not hatred. It's that I don't have the capacity to return that kind of affection. And if I can't reciprocate it, I don't want it offered." Lucia didn't answer. Internally, she felt a quiet disappointment. It didn't sound like heartbreak, it sounded like convenience. She thought, so, this is the logic of a man who has never had to long for anything. Still, she met his eyes and said, "I understand, but I want your word, on your family's honor." He paused. "My family's honor, that carries weight. What are your conditions?" She answered plainly. "First, there will be no abuse, verbal or physical, none." Hugo opened his mouth, likely to defend himself, but she raised her hand slightly. "I don't mean to insult you. I only want to be clear from the beginning," he nodded. "Understood. And the second?" Lucia hesitated. "If my heart changes, if I find myself caring too much, then I want you to send me a rose." "A rose?" Hugo echoed, genuinely puzzled. "It's symbolic," she said quietly. "Just promise me." Something about her words gave him pause. He studied her. He had no idea that Lucia had dreamed of a rose once, a dream that had left her with a sense of finality. "This is a strange clause for a contract," he remarked. Lucia shrugged lightly. "Not everything needs to be logical." He exhaled slowly, reconsidering. "Wouldn't you prefer something more concrete, financial guarantees, or legal protection?" She shook her head. "I'm not after money. As a duchess, I'll have what I need. Beyond that, more won't bring more peace." He narrowed his eyes slightly. "You said you're 18? She smiled. "That's right. You don't speak like a typical 18-year-old. Lucia simply repeated her conditions. "They're not difficult, are they?" "No," he admitted. "They're remarkably simple." With a sense of finality, he reached for a pen and signed. "Very well. I agree." Lucia exhaled in relief, the weight in her chest easing. "Thank you." They had crossed an invisible line together, and though the future remained uncertain, mutual understanding now formed its foundation. Later that day, they sat together in silence. "We're engaged now," Lucia said, as if trying to convince herself. "We are," Hugo replied. "We'll notify the necessary parties soon." She blinked. "You want to notarize it?" He was taken aback by her immediate refusal. "No, most do." "I'd rather not," she said. "It's already official, and more formalities just make it feel heavy." He studied her again, surprised by how quickly she shifted from thoughtful to firm. "Do you value honor so deeply?" "I think I value being able to sleep at night," she replied. "Then go home before dark. I won't have you here without permission." Lucia nodded, sensing something different in his voice, less rigid than before. But the shift didn't last. "Don't disguise yourself as a housemaid again," he said suddenly. And that stunt was reckless. She stared at him. "Why are you talking to me like that?" He tilted his head slightly. "That's just how I speak to my woman." Her cheeks flushed. "You're... what?" "You agreed to marry me." "We're not married yet." "In my family, engagement is as binding as a marriage contract." Lucia blinked, not knowing whether to feel trapped or flattered. She shook her head slightly. "You could at least try being courteous to your fiancé." "That's not tradition, that's just me." His honesty was disarming. She looked away, unsure what to make of him anymore. Was he calculating? Honest? Unstable? "You left the palace with fake permission letters," he added. "That can't happen again. Do you understand?" Lucia finally challenged him. "And if I don't?" "Try me and see." he said. She gave a wry smile. He hasn't changed since the first time we met, she thought. She changed the subject. I want to see someone before the wedding. Who? She hesitated. Norman. I figured, Hugo replied. Lucia looked at him, surprised. You knew? He didn't answer directly. I'm not stopping you, but keep our engagement secret. I don't want gossip. She beamed. May I still see her after we marry? He looked at her, then nodded. Just be discreet. Thank you, she said, her tone soft. That's very considerate. Hugo smirked. Last time you called me a philanderer? Now I'm considerate? She looked away, embarrassed. I didn't mean it like that. He watched her carefully. You barely know me, Lucia. People will talk. Some call me a monster. You might believe them eventually. She didn't respond, and Hugo didn't push further. Later, Lucia sat alone in her room, penning a letter. Open quote, We are experiencing delightful weather. I hope this letter finds you well. I'm attending to a few important matters, but I am well. Please don't worry. Our paths will cross again. You're a dear friend and always will be. And yet, close quote. She folded the letter carefully, unsure how to send it. She hoped Hugo would arrange it. A few days later, she found herself restless. The waiting was harder than she had imagined. Bored and without anything better to do, she decided to do laundry herself. She stood in the bucket, scrubbing quietly, trying to keep her mind from wandering. This is better than waiting, she thought. What's done is done. Suddenly, a voice interrupted her. You there? Do you work here? Lucia froze, startled by the unfamiliar woman. The court lady approached, squinting. Are you mute? Where's the princess? Lucia remained silent, unsure how to explain. There's a visitor. Take me to her, the woman insisted. Lucia blinked. Visitor? Who would come see me here? She looked down at her soaked dress, her hands still wringing water. She hadn't prepared for this. Not the guest, not the intrusion, and definitely not the questions. I didn't realize laundry was part of a lady's education, Duke Hugo said flatly as he stepped into the courtyard. His tone wasn't mocking, but it wasn't approving either. He looked down at Lucia, who stood ankle-deep in a wash bucket, holding a damp dress. Lucia froze. Duke Hugo, she thought, caught off guard. He glanced briefly at the court lady nearby and frowned. A palace servant who doesn't recognize the princess? That's a problem. Then, turning to Lucia, he added dryly, though it doesn't help that Her Highness has a habit of blending in with the staff. Lucia felt heat rise to her face. Why is he here? She wondered. She tried to sound composed. Oh, hello. What brings you here? Why don't you step out of that bucket so we can talk? He replied, his voice cool as ever. She nodded quickly. Just a moment. As she stepped out, her foot slipped, and she fell with a soft thud to the ground. Duke Hugo paused, watching her with a raised brow. I should pretend to be unconscious, she thought in quiet frustration. Why do I keep falling today? Before she could make a move, he offered his hand. Lucia hesitated, then accepted it, letting him help her up. Thank you, she muttered, brushing off her dress. Noticing she was barefoot and still slightly wet, Hugo silently stepped forward and without ceremony lifted her into his arms. Lucia stiffened. I'll get soap on your coat, she whispered. I'm not worried, he replied, already walking. Let's go inside. As he carried her past the silent court lady, Lucia caught her breath, unsure of what to say. Her cheeks were flushed, but Duke Hugo didn't look at her. Back inside, the maids were already waiting. Lucia was surprised. They hadn't been this attentive before. I'll be right back, she told him. She didn't question their sudden diligence. There was no point. Besides, Duke Hugo's visit was more important. As they changed her into fresh clothes, she couldn't stop wondering, why did he come in person? He could have sent a letter. When she returned, Duke Hugo was seated in the parlor. Tea had already been served. Lucia took her seat, quietly impressed by the quality. Finer than anything in the palace, she thought. Are you well? Hugo asked casually. She smiled. Yes, I am. He always sounds more polite when others are around, she mused inwardly. I saw for myself, he said, sipping. His unintentional bluntness made her smile faintly. Then his tone shifted. I need to speak with you privately. Send the others out. Lucia nodded. Actually, I don't have any regular handmaidens. He raised an eyebrow. None. She dismissed the few present, and they were left alone. I wanted to ask if you'd take a walk with me, he said. Lucia agreed, and together they stepped outside into the quiet afternoon air. As they walked, Hugo's questions began. Do you normally take on servant duties yourself? Lucia answered plainly. There's no one else to do it. What about the palace staff? I live here alone. He stopped. Completely alone? Yes. No handmaidens, no staff. None assigned to me. You cook and clean for yourself? Yes. She gave a small smile. It's not that difficult. I only have to look after myself. Hugo was quiet for a long moment. How long has this been the case? A few years. He didn't reply immediately. He didn't expect this, she realized. Hugo recalled seeing her at the banquet in a plain dress. It hadn't meant much at the time, but now pieces began to fit together. Her informal proposal, the lack of demands in the contract, the strange freedom she seemed to have, it all made more sense now. This whole time, he murmured. She walked beside him, silent. Then, finally, she asked, So what did you come to talk about? I received His Majesty's permission to marry you this morning. The wedding will be within the month. Lucia blinked. That's soon. I moved quickly. As they continued walking, Lucia brought up the matter of the handmaidens. I'll see to it, Hugo offered. Please don't, she said firmly. If you get involved, they'll be punished. I don't want that. It's not worth it. You're too forgiving. I didn't mind being alone. It gave me peace. And it's good for you too. For me? If I were a spoiled princess locked in a tower, I'd never have dared to propose to you. He stopped again, just briefly, and then leaned in and kissed her. She gasped, hand flying to her mouth. Her cheeks burned with surprise, but he had already stepped back. For the first time, Hugo allowed himself a faint smile. She'll do just fine as the lady of the house, he thought. As they strolled again, Hugo mentioned casually, After the wedding, I'll be going north, likely for some time. Lucia's expression shifted. The north, that's where his land is, cold, remote, and always on the brink of conflict. Back at the manor, Hugo spoke about the wedding arrangements. We'll keep it informal, no need for a spectacle. Good, Lucia said quickly. She had no desire for a grand event and no family she cared to invite. She hesitated, then took out a letter. I have a favor. Would you deliver this to Norman? The novelist? She nodded. Yes. Hugo accepted it without complaint. Thank you, she said, then quickly corrected herself. I mean, you're just as kind as I expected. He glanced at her sideways. She must have thought I was a heartless brute, he thought. At least she's not afraid of me, he added silently. I should be going, he said, standing. Lucia nodded. People will hear I visited. There'll be more eyes on you. Stay discreet. Don't meet just anyone. She frowned slightly at his tone, but said nothing. This place is too remote, he continued. You should move to a more secure residence. Now that I've come here, His Majesty will make arrangements. All right, she said quietly. She thought of her father, but didn't ask about him. Hugo noticed, and it caught him off guard. He remembered his meeting with the king. Open quote, You want to marry my 16th daughter? The king had laughed. She's very precious to me, so the bride price will be steep. Close quote. The king hadn't even remembered her name. And yet, here she was. Back at his estate, Hugo was met with immediate frustration. Where have you been? Fabian shouted. You disappeared without notice. Hugo said nothing. If you'd told me, I would have arranged a proper escort. I went to the palace, Hugo interrupted. Fabian blinked. You what? Alone? You're thinking of the crown prince? Hugo said, amused. Didn't see him. Should have. Fabian paused, confused. Then why? I'm getting married, Hugo stated. Fabian stared. To the princess? Yes. Within the month, Fabian's mouth fell open. Don't inform the household. I don't want them all rushing here. I'll be going north right after the wedding. And the bride price. We'll use the island in the St. Isles, the one with the mine. That's too much. It's already agreed. Fabian couldn't hide his discomfort. An informal wedding? In peacetime? He didn't say more, but unease settled over him. He thought of the troubled lands near the northern borders. Is something brewing? I'll assign you some errands, Hugo said. I want quiet. Yes, Your Excellency, Fabian replied, still stunned. As Fabian walked away, thoughts racing, he muttered to himself, A princess marrying a man like that? She'll end up miserable. He frowned. She doesn't know what kind of man the Duke really is. Princess Lucia stepped into the carriage, eyes drifting to the road ahead. She hadn't taken this path in years. As the palace walls faded behind them, silence hung between her and her new maid, Dana. Dana stole nervous glances at her from the side. Your Highness, may I speak freely? Lucia gave a small nod, her voice calm. Go ahead. I wasn't assigned to serve you. The Duke requested me directly. I just wanted you to know. Lucia turned to look at her. Why did you accept? Dana hesitated. Because I thought he was the only one in the palace who noticed I existed. Lucia let that sit for a moment, then said quietly, It seems he notices more than most. The journey was long. They didn't arrive at the capital until after nightfall. Lucia leaned forward as the carriage slowed in front of a quiet house nestled in a modest neighborhood. Dana peered out. Is this the residence His Majesty arranged for you? No, Lucia answered. This is someone I asked to see. Lucia stepped down first, eyes on the gate. Dana followed behind her, hesitating. You can wait in the carriage, Lucia said gently. Dana bowed and stepped back without a word. Lucia knocked softly. It wasn't long before the door creaked open. Norman blinked as he saw her. Princess? Lucia gave a faint smile. I'm sorry to show up like this. He stepped aside to let her in. The house was small, lined with shelves stuffed full of books and parchment. A kettle steamed quietly in the corner. She sat at the wooden table, gaze steady. Did you receive my letter? I did, Norman said, pouring her tea. You're getting married? Yes, she replied. To Duke Hugo? Yes. He leaned back slightly. I didn't think you'd go through with it. Lucia's voice stayed level. I had reasons. Norman looked at her closely but didn't push. Why come to me now? I wanted to see you, she said plainly. That's all. He set the teacup down. You're about to step into something that could ruin you. I know. He scoffed, not unkindly. Do you? She didn't flinch. No one ruins me, Norman. I've already lived through worse than a political marriage. He let out a breath. You're strong, I'll give you that. But that man, he's not like the others. I'm not expecting kindness, she said softly, just honesty and space. There was a long pause. Will you still write? Norman asked. Lucia smiled faintly. Of course. You'll be the only one I'll write honestly to. He nodded, then stood. Stay the night. It's too late to travel. I'll stay until morning, she agreed. I don't want to be late to the capital. At dawn, Lucia stepped back into the carriage. The city was just waking as they rolled toward the gates of the Duke's estate. She hadn't seen the estate in person before. Its tall iron gates and vast, quiet grounds had always seemed a world away from her life in the palace. Now, it was her new reality. The staff were lined up outside as the carriage pulled in. Dana blinked in surprise. They're all waiting. Lucia gave a slight nod, face unreadable. The butler stepped forward and bowed deeply. Welcome, Your Grace. Lucia met his eyes for a moment before stepping down. She didn't feel like a duchess. Not yet. The house was cold inside, despite its size and order. She glanced around and asked, Where is the Duke? In the study, Your Grace. He's expecting you. Lucia followed the servant silently. She found Hugo at his desk, reading documents. He didn't look up immediately. You arrived early, he said eventually. I thought it was better to be early than late. He nodded, motioning for her to sit. There was a silence between them, one not born of discomfort but unfamiliarity. Lucia finally broke it. You didn't ask where I spent the night. I assumed you had your reasons, Hugo replied. She studied him for a moment. I visited someone I trust. He didn't question her. I want to make something clear before the wedding, she said. He looked at her fully now. Go on. I don't expect affection, but I expect respect. I don't want to be used as a symbol or pawn. Not anymore. Hugo nodded slowly. You'll be treated as an equal. That's the only way this works. They held each other's gaze for a quiet moment. Two people who didn't pretend to be in love, but who understood that something more honest might be possible. Hugo pressed a soft kiss to the back of Lucia's hand, his lips trailing slowly down her skin. She flushed deeply and instinctively pulled back, startled by the unfamiliar tenderness. Your Grace? She stammered as he gently guided her to lie down. My name, he said quietly. Huh? She looked up at him, confused. I don't want you to call me by any titles. Not here. Just say my name. Your name? She repeated, unsure. He gave her a faint, knowing look. Don't tell me you've forgotten it. Of course not, she replied, flustered. Hugh? Her cheeks colored even more, but he simply studied her with a calm, unreadable expression. That look, Lucia thought. Just now, what was that? Maybe I'll call you Hugo, she said shyly. No, he answered without hesitation. What? She blinked, caught off guard. I liked what you called me just now, he said simply. Hugh, she echoed, almost under her breath. He held her gaze for a moment, then leaned forward, pulling off his robe. "Vivian," he said calmly. Lucia shifted uncomfortably, fidgeting with her fingers. "It's just I rarely get called by my name. I'm not used to it." She murmured. "You'll get used to it," Hugo replied. A faint smirk touched his lips. "Vivian?" The way he said it made her cheeks warm. She lowered her gaze, trying to compose herself. "You're more headstrong than you look," he added, a quiet grin in his voice. "I am not," she protested, lifting her head slightly. "Yes, you are." "Then what does that make you? You always demand unreasonable things," she said, brows narrowing. "That's because I'm always right." He leaned in without waiting for a response and kissed her. The kiss was slow, deliberate. When they parted for air, their eyes held for a moment, searching. Then they kissed again, deeper this time, as though trying to understand something wordless between them. Hugo drew back first. Lucia's breath came unsteadily. "Breathe through your nose," he said, taking her hand and placing it gently at the side of his neck. "Here." "Oh," she whispered, clearly unsure. "Don't worry." "If it's not your first time, it won't hurt much." "And if it is?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer, only met her eyes, then leaned down to kiss her again, this time slower, more careful. She tensed as he moved closer, her body instinctively flinching. He took her hands and kissed them softly. "Relax," he said. She nodded faintly, uncertain but trusting. Then he entered her. "Ah, it hurts," she said, wincing. "Try to breathe," he murmured, adjusting his movement, gentler now. She covered her mouth with her hand, her body trembling. He paused for a moment. "I've only just started," he said quietly. "Huh?" She looked at him, unsure if she heard him right. He continued, his pace steady but slow. "Wait," she said, her voice unsteady. But his thoughts were slipping elsewhere. Adrift. Why does it feel different? He wondered. Has it been that long? Or is it just her? Every part of her scent, the way her skin felt beneath his touch, the softness of her voice, pulled him in deeper. It wasn't just desire. It was something else. Something unfamiliar. Whenever I'm with her, I lose sense of everything else, he thought, like I'm somewhere else entirely, as if nothing before this ever mattered. And in that quiet space between them, they gave in, not just to the moment, but to something deeper, unspoken, and quietly consuming. If you found this video interesting, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to get updates when we upload next.